Welcome to this explainer. Today we are unpacking a really fascinating document from 2026 called Magnifica Humanitas, and it tackles what is arguably the defining challenge of our era, the completely unchecked, rapid rollout of artificial intelligence.
It brings up a question I think we've all been asking ourselves lately, right? Who actually controls our digital future? Look, we all know AI is a profoundly human reality. We see its incredible power to do things like cure diseases, optimize global supply chains, connect us. But beneath all that promise, there's this nagging, kind of uncomfortable feeling of powerlessness. Are we actually the ones directing this technology? Or are a handful of major tech players basically setting the conditions for our everyday lives without our consent?
Well, this is exactly where Magnifica Humanitas comes in. And what's so remarkable about this text is how it perfectly captures our universal everyday anxieties about things like data monopolies, deepfakes, algorithmic bias, and honestly, the very real loss of genuine human connection. It argues that these emerging technologies aren't just changing how we work, they are deeply, fundamentally affecting our collective imagination. They're shaping what we value and how we view ourselves as human beings.
Now, you might be a little surprised to hear that this sweeping critique actually comes from the Pope. But here's the thing, this isn't some sudden random pivot into tech policy. It actually represents a 135-year legacy of Catholic social doctrine. We're talking about a tradition that started way back in 1891 during the Industrial Revolution, moved through the global economic crisis of 1931, the environmental crisis in 2015, and now the AI revolution in 2026. This framework has consistently sought to defend human dignity through every major global shift, basically weighing massive structures of power against the well-being of everyday people.
Now, if you're feeling a bit skeptical about taking tech policy advice from a religious institution, I totally get it. That is completely understandable. But you absolutely do not need to be religious to get a lot out of this framework. In fact, secular digital rights activists and tech ethicists are finding it to be a massive philosophical ally. It gives us this structured, really robust vocabulary for the modern fight against economic exploitation and the concentration of tech power. It challenges us to look past all the shiny hype of efficiency and critically evaluate the actual human cost.
So the text lays out 4 foundational principles for our digital age. And a big one is this idea of the common good and the universal destination of goods. It argues that things like algorithms, digital platforms, and the data itself shouldn't just be hoarded by a few corporations. They really need to be treated as shared public goods. Think about it like a public water system. Massive server farms and AI training data are resources that should benefit the entire human family. It's demanding solidarity, recognizing that our futures are completely intertwined, and pushing for social justice so technology doesn't just create new classes of excluded people.
And that brings us to a really critical concept, subsidiarity. Basically, subsidiarity is the principle that decisions should be made at the most local, community level possible, rather than being imposed top-down by some distant power. Think of the difference between a local town hall making decisions for its own neighborhood versus some sweeping, opaque federal mandate. Applying this to tech, subsidiarity demands that a handful of monopolies shouldn't unilaterally dictate our digital lives. Decisions about how algorithms actually function or how our data is harvested, those require local democratic oversight and accountability. Okay, so what happens when we just ignore subsidiarity? Well, we fall right into what the document calls the technocratic paradigm. This is a super dangerous mindset where efficiency, control, and profit become the absolute, sole measures of human value. And honestly, we've all felt the sting of this paradigm, haven't we? It's that feeling when you realize you're just being treated like an algorithmically targeted consumer on your feed, where your attention is literally just a variable to be managed. Under this paradigm, human beings are reduced to mere data points to be optimized.
To push back on that, this explainer stresses a really crucial distinction: the difference between AI as a powerful tool and AI as a decision maker. Look, AI is incredibly efficient at data processing and pattern recognition. It's a great tool, but we cross a very dangerous line when we start delegating sensitive decisions, like who gets a bank loan, who gets hired, or who gets paroled, to automated systems. Why? Because AI fundamentally lacks a body, it lacks lived experience, it has no moral conscience, and zero compassion. It simply cannot understand the weight of a human life.
Which leads us to a pretty dangerous illusion. Is artificial intelligence truly neutral? We often kind of assume algorithms are objective, right? We like to think of math as pure and unbiased, but the encyclical strongly warns that AI is never morally neutral. It always encodes the biases, the cultural assumptions, and the profit priorities of the people who created it. When an AI system presents itself as an objective judge, it's effectively cloaking human bias in this shiny veneer of mathematical neutrality, which makes systemic injustice so much harder to spot and fight against.
So to combat this creeping technocracy, Pope Leo XIV issues this highly provocative call to disarm AI. Now, obviously, this doesn't mean literally taking weapons away from militarized robots. It's a metaphor for the aggressive arms race we see between tech giants. It means we have to halt the monopolistic race for dominance, this crazy economic warfare where companies are just rushing out untested models simply to beat the competition. Disarming AI means slowing down. It means democratizing control and strictly subjecting technology to standards of social justice before we ever let it loose into our lives.
And this critique of tech actually extends into a much deeper cultural warning about something called transhumanism. That's the desire to use technology to transcend or upgrade our human limits. And look, it's easy to see the appeal here. Who wouldn't want to engineer away our flaws or optimize our biology? But the document warns that this is a really dangerous illusion. If we start viewing the human body and mind as just some flawed project that needs algorithmic optimization, we risk engineering away the very vulnerabilities that make us human in the first place.
To really drive this home, the text points to the famous psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl. He reminds us of the profound, unprogrammable duality of human nature. We are capable of terrifying destruction, yes, but we are also capable of unimaginable grace, sacrifice, and spiritual resilience. An algorithm simply cannot compute that kind of moral courage. You just can't digitally replicate the human soul's capacity to find meaning in the absolute darkest of places.
And that leads to what is arguably the most beautiful and honestly the most countercultural argument of the entire document. Our limits, our flaws, and even our suffering, they aren't system bugs that need to be patched by a tech billionaire. They are the exact traits that allow us to forge genuine connections. Think about it. The word compassion literally means to suffer with. If we try to use AI to build this totally frictionless life free of all limitation, we inadvertently build a life entirely free of deep love and empathy.
So, to frame the monumental choice we have in front of us, the encyclical uses two historical metaphors, the Tower of Babel versus the rebuilding of Jerusalem. Now, you don't need to view these as religious dogma at all. Think of them as powerful cultural archetypes for how we organize our society. Babel represents this doomed, top-down uniformity driven by pride and concentrated power. Jerusalem, on the other hand, represents a collaborative, bottom-up project where every single family takes responsibility for their section of the community.
Right now, we are at grave risk of falling into the Babel syndrome. This is a digital future where massive tech giants build a single, uniform landscape that flattens our diversity, monopolizes our data, and completely excludes the vulnerable. You can totally see this today in the walled gardens of the internet, those homogenized social media feeds, and that deep feeling of isolation we all experience despite being quote-unquote connected. It forces everyone to speak the exact same digital language of consumption.
But conversely, we can choose to rebuild Jerusalem. This represents a democratic approach, where everyone actually has a hand in shaping technology. In the modern tech world, this looks like open-source communities, decentralized networks, and cooperative data trusts. It means creating a digital ecosystem that actually serves the common good, respects local cultures, and protects marginalized voices. It's a vision where technology fosters genuine communion rather than just generating corporate revenue.
Okay, so how do we actually make that happen? Well, the document outlines 3 concrete steps. First, we have to dismantle monopolies and disarm technology from this endless race for dominance. Second, we need to stop treating data as a private commodity to be bought and sold, and instead democratize it as a shared public good. And third, we absolutely must rigorously prioritize human dignity in every single stage of AI design, flat out refusing to deploy systems that treat people as expendable.
This philosophical framework isn't just theory. It demands urgent, real-world action to protect 3 vital areas: our minds, our bodies, and our future. We have to defend our minds by fighting AI-driven disinformation and treating truth as a common good. We must fiercely protect the bodies and livelihoods of everyday workers who are currently being threatened by automation. And we absolutely have to safeguard our future by shielding kids and young people from these addictive, profit-driven algorithms that explicitly exploit their psychological vulnerabilities.
Ultimately, the document argues that true progress just doesn't come from a microchip upgrade, a neural implant, or endless algorithmic optimization. We don't transcend our humanity by merging with machines. We become truly more than human through our capacity to step outside of ourselves, in love, in sacrifice, and in profound solidarity with our fellow human beings. And that, right there, is a kind of progress that no machine is ever going to replicate.
So as you navigate this rapidly changing, often super overwhelming digital age, you really have to ask yourself an empowering question. Are the algorithms and platforms you use every single day dictating your life and isolating you? Or are you demanding that these technologies be held accountable so they empower your community and protect the vulnerable? The choice between top-down control and shared responsibility really begins with us. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking the hard questions, and I'll catch you next time.